As YN awakens the next day, late for work, as if she was drugged, not noticing her alarm, she rushes to work just to encounter the possessive and overly obsessed Peter, the stranger who seemed to be over the top, not shying away from oversharing his fantasies with YN, seemingly following her anywhere she went. Hi folks, I'm R, and welcome to Your Boyfriend Day 2, where we are faced with the mysterious Peter again, seemingly preying on the stressed YN, who struggles to make the ends meet in a big city, desperate for the slightest affection and love that she can get to unwind and carry on with life. Keep in mind that this video will have spoilers, and with that said, let's begin. Make sure to watch the first video I made of the game, being the first day, as this video will directly continue from where we left off. A strange figure appearing behind YN's window at night, staring into the room. The night passes, with YN using all of her power to get up, feeling extremely sleep deprived as she works day on end to afford rent and pay her bills, now being an independent adult, moving out of her parents' house. Finally managing to get up, she looks around her messy bedroom with a pile of clothes in the corner of her room, clothes that have been dirty for weeks as she barely has the time to wash them. YN then notices her window being open, having no recollection of her opening it, with no one else but the obscured figure being present behind her window the night before. It depicts the danger YN might be in, with the figure seemingly being no other than the overly obsessed Peter, the stranger she met earlier who wouldn't let her go. After playing a quick game on her game Daddy, YN in shock realizes it's past 9 AM on Sunday, being very late for work. As she quickly dresses up and goes to the kitchen section to pick up her work keys, she encounters Lucy, her roommate.
Hey, looks like someone's in a hurry.
Having a grudge against Lucy for being a deadbeat, not working and relying on YN to pay the bills, she snaps at her for not waking her up, just using it as an excuse to bring up the issue of her failing to pay the bills. Lucy, at first being kind and friendly, changes her mood and goes back to her room. After a short dispute, YN rushes out of the apartment to get back to work, which she needed to start more than 2 hours ago. While on her way, stressed to how she might lose her job, she contemplates on how she didn't like the stress involved in the diner anyway, so either way, losing it wouldn't matter too much. Or maybe it's just her trying to calm her nerves, reasoning with the possibilities. Entering the diner, quickly going to punch in arrival time, she notices her card was punched in already on time, someone seemingly having her back so she wouldn't suffer any consequences. Considering who might have done this, she sees a person carrying many plates coming to the kitchen, approaching her and asking where she has been. TK protests that they have been covering YN for the past 45 minutes, doing extra work so the boss wouldn't realize that she's not in. As TK carries on to wash the plates, YN snaps back saying that it's empty on Sundays anyway, so TK should stop with their pretense and self-righteousness. TK points out of the service window when YN in shock observes how busy the diner truly is. TK explains that a tour bus came today, hence why there are so many people in the diner. YN, being a stressed, sad, miserable worker, goes on for the longest time possible complaining about customers, calling them every name possible out there, putting all good and bad in one basket. Which brings to mind, it would be better off for both YN and the customers for YN not to work there anymore. After a miserable course of working, serving the customers she refers to as unpleasant boomers in the nicest way she does, the crowd dies down, leaving just a few for some last coffee and lunch. Going back to the kitchen, leaning on a wall to get some well-deserved rest, TK comes to YN, telling her that she missed a table. Going back to the diner, scanning the room, she hears a faint familiar voice, being no one else but Peter, calling for YN's attention, probably one of the last people she would want to see after such a hectic and stressful day. Surprisingly though, YN is pleased to see Peter, happy that he's actually here. She goes on complaining how horrible her day was and how her feet hurt when Peter, in an over-the-top but nice manner, mentions how he would be willing to literally carry her to a less crowded place if she'd like to. After a bit of flattering from Peter's side, YN goes on saying that they're just friends, looking at Peter for some sort of confirmation, as if she wants to understand their situation, with him seemingly happy with that label, as if though his fierce glare says otherwise. As YN goes back to the kitchen to ask TK for permission to go on a break, TK asks who he is, to which she responds that he's her boyfriend, someone who asked her on a date right after meeting her. As TK is surprised, YN chuckles, saying that he's just a friend, with TK still not being convinced. As they talk more, TK displays a concerned and seemingly disappointed expression, forcing a smile as if they're having feelings for YN. TK then expresses their thoughts that they wish to take YN on a lunch, clearly portraying that they have feelings for her, to which YN is not oblivious to. But it's something that she doesn't want to even imagine, being in some sort of relationship with a co-worker. It becomes clear to why TK treats YN so nicely and even cover her for an hour. It's all because they are infatuated with her. They plan to get a coffee on the way to work tomorrow, with YN leaving the kitchen. In the diner, Peter acts a little strange, as if he's lost in thoughts, when he explains he's a little exhausted as he had a long night, which he spent doing his hobby, testing and reviewing products. He films himself reviewing products, even at times getting paid little money to test small companies' products for exposure. As Peter and YN head to her apartment for some lunch, they start to slowly get intimate.
Hey! None of that in the hall.
When the landlord barges in, protesting, asking who Peter is, when Peter, in an uninterested manner, responds very shortly. The landlord then changes his focus to YN, explaining how she needs to have a discussion with Lucy to whether she must pay or leave, as all the financial responsibilities have befallen on YN, working extra shifts just to keep up. YN defends Lucy and explains she cannot just kick her out, to which the landlord becomes impressed by YN's hard-working ethics, offering her a part-time job at the building and introducing himself as Don Williams. YN happy to this offer, as this would mean she could work extra with no need of traveling. Leaving her job at the diner, she takes it, thanking Don for the opportunity. Finally going to the apartment, YN shows Peter around, finally settling in the kitchen, where he sits down. Peter yet again gets lost in thought, to which YN acts surprised, asking if he's okay, when he stutters, as if caught off guard doing something that he's not supposed to do. Peter then works his charm on YN once more, saying how wonderful she is, and implying if he was her roommate, he would pay for the bills and help out with much more. As he takes her hand and begins to become intimate, Lucy barges in, yet again interrupting him, which he shows irritation through his expression. Lucy explains the landlord asked for a meeting with her, possibly wanting to discuss the issue of rent, with Lucy knowing full well it is about rent and the possibility of her getting evicted. She proceeds to make murky remarks about Peter and YN when she asks to have a late night spending time together, to which YN is surprised, as Lucy never wants to hang out with her, thinking it might be her way of trying to sweeten things up not to get evicted. She then proceeds to act even stranger, flirting with YN and making suggestive remarks, making the situation very awkward indeed. Pleased with herself, being completely obnoxious and intrusive, Lucy finally leaves, letting Peter and YN get back to what they were about to do. Peter, fully unfazed by Lucy's antics, agrees with YN how horrible she truly is. The moment being ruined, with both Peter and YN feeling embarrassed, they get back to focusing on lunch when her break runs up soon, with YN rushing back to work. After a tedious and long shift, YN finishes her shift clocking out when she encounters TK in their casual outfit. As both head out together, TK heads to their car, fiddling around with their keys when they muster all their courage, saying that they picked a creepy vibe from Peter, who couldn't get his eyes off TK and YN when they were speaking in the kitchen. Maybe that's why Peter became expressionless when YN walked back to the diner. Maybe he is possessive, obsessed and controlling as his behavior might suggest. Or just maybe he's as clueless as it gets when trying to socialize, so maybe he's just an awkward guy. YN proceeds to defend Peter when TK bids YN goodbye, both heading back to their corresponding homes. Back in her apartment, it's awfully dark with no sign of Lucy anywhere. Being surprised as Lucy is typically back at this time, she dismisses it as Lucy is unpredictable anyway, so maybe she's just on another long night wasting her life away, not having a care in the world. But more surprisingly is that Lucy wanted to actually meet with YN, which makes her think she could have just forgotten. YN, making her way through the dark living room, manages to find her way to her room, switching the light on, noticing the window is still wide open. Thinking Lucy might be the culprit, she lets out a grunt when the lights suddenly switch off, startling YN to what might be the cause. Thinking it might be Lucy forgetting to pay the utility bills, YN makes her way to the living room to find some candles. Trying to navigate her way through the pitch black halls, she bumps into a person, thinking it could be Lucy or Dawn, asking who they are, when in return she gets no response, with her heart starting to race with the person keeping quiet, and in a split second proceeding to wrap their arms tightly around YN, putting a wet cloth against her nose and mouth. As YN tries to break free, the figure holds YN even tighter, pressing harder against her mouth and nose when she slowly starts to lose her consciousness, suddenly feeling a kiss against her cheek with a familiar voice belonging to no other than Peter, saying that he will see her tomorrow. Calling her darling, proving to be the complete psychopath that he portrayed to be. This portrays the person who was observing YN the night before through her window was no other than the possessive and obsessed Peter, who clearly doesn't understand how a two-way relationship works and forces himself into one, getting only his way, which in this case is using chloroform to knock YN out. Peter, talking about having a long night, reviewing products, was seemingly bluffing, just acting normal until he reveals his true nature after kidnapping YN and restraining her, so that she couldn't run away. The alarm also didn't work in the morning with YN waking up late, as it could portray that Peter might have drugged her, hence why she was feeling more exhausted than usual, with her body feeling numb, with no recollection of what happened to her, with Peter seemingly have had done horrible things. The window kept being left open as Peter had intruded in the room and observed YN closely, with this time taking it a step further and seemingly kidnapping her. The reason why Lucy was also not present in the apartment could point out that she was also incapacitated or even murdered by Peter, as she made a plan to spend the night with YN. Therefore, this would interrupt Peter's plan in kidnapping YN. As Lucy also acted as a burden on YN, taking her for granted, as even Peter mentioned. It's possible in Peter's mind, she was painted as a villain that deserved to disappear, with Peter thinking he's doing YN a favor by getting rid of her. It's left to speculation now to what Peter would do to YN, but according to his manic and obsessive behavior, following YN everywhere and fantasizing on the things he would do for her, YN might be safe for now as long as she agrees to whatever Peter asks and wants. As if YN refuses anything, Peter has the upper hand and would possibly burst out and go as far as punishing her, thinking he's doing this for both of them, making the decisions in her stead as if he's doing her a favor, as otherwise he would give YN space, letting her to make her own decisions. Even now, after things going so well, well, he decided to kidnap her, clearly portraying he doesn't understand how a healthy, normal relationship works. And that's it for the end of today's video, folks. If you enjoyed it, make sure to stay tuned for more by hitting on the subscribe button and the notification bell, as I'm planning to make another video for day 3 as soon as it comes out. It's been your host Star, as always. Until the next video, have a fantastic day.